Wakulla, and welcome to the Wakulla Summer Sunday radio program with your host, Herb Donaldson.
To me, music is imagery. When I listen to music, I have images in my mind. It's usually great big landscapes with big skies and clouds and birds flying in and out. And so it gives my music that extra layer of imagery.
Many in the Wakulla County area know the name Sammy Tedder, and if they don't, chances are they know his music. I drove to Sopchoppy to spend the better part of a day with Sammy. He had just finished one of his lectures at the Museum of Florida History and was preparing for an upcoming event when I arrived. As I drove up, I heard in the middle of what seemed to me a gigantic forest the melody of his saxophone. I wondered, what is it that brings so many musicians to Sopchoppy?
I don't know. I think the appeal of this place to me was the solitude that you could have here. And you could get away from the hustle and bustle and be around nature, the river. You're pretty close to the coast, to the beach, to the marsh. You know, just to me, the appeal was just the elements of nature here. I grew up in Tallahassee. When we were kids, we would always come down to go to the beach. You know, like Carabel, there's a little beach before the public beach. There's a little local beach, I call it, or hidden beach. We always went to the beach there when we were little kids. And so you have to drive through Wakulla County to get there. Then other friends of mine had property down here, and then finally in the late 70s, some friends of ours from Tallahassee moved down here, bought land and moved down here. And they were musicians, and so we played music together, so I started looking around. We started looking for land down here too. And that was in like 79.
What was it like here in 79?
Believe it or not, even though there's no neighbor for about a mile, they were even further away.
Wow.
When we first built the house, we didn't live here. We just came down on weekends, and we still worked in Tallahassee. At night down here, it's the sounds, the frogs, the katydids just start going crazy during the summertime. And so I would do most of my recordings just out here from the porch. I still do if it's quiet enough, but now people have moved in within a mile or so, and they have roosters and dogs and motorcycles and four-wheelers, so that sound really carries a long way, believe it or not. When you're out recording with a really good microphone, you can hear things happening miles and miles away.
Wow.
So it's getting more difficult to record right here, and I have to go deeper into the wilderness to get good, clean recordings without, I call it noise pollution. Well, I have the river cane flutes that I make, and I make drums. My wife makes udu drums, the clay pots, you know, from Africa.
Okay.
And I make didgeridoos. You know what that is?
Is that like that Australian type instrument?
Yeah, it's a long tube. It plays basically one note. The lowest note possible on that tube is like a drone, and you circular breathe. Are you recording now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. This is my 50th year of playing the saxophone. Hard to believe it's been that long, but when I was 11, my brother had played trombone, Alan, my brother, and he says, if you want to play a really neat instrument, play the saxophone. And so I got a saxophone, and it was an alto sax, and I remember the first night I brought it home, put the reed on there, and I was able to get a sound out of it, and then I got The Baldwin Band Builder was the name of the book that all the kids used for their bands. And I was in the elementary school band. And so that first night I got it out, and there it was, Mary Had a Little Lamb and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I already knew how to read music because I'd been in the choir when I was a little, 5 or 6 years old. And you had to learn how to read music. I guess I just had a musical inclination. And it was fairly easy for me to figure out the scale. And so I turned to the back of the book and learned the Marines hymn. And I remember the next day I went into band and played that, and the band director got on to me. He says, you need to go back to the beginning and learn the basics. First of all, when you're down here recording, so a lot of the times the sounds just permeate through the house anyway because they're so loud. And, you know, they're not really in my music accidentally like that, but they're always, I just live with these sounds. When you go outside during the daytime, the cicadas and the birds and the hawks, and when we have enough rain, the creek is flowing, you can hear the waterfalls out in the woods. And I really didn't know what I was doing. I just was intrigued by everything that went on down here. And I started to compose music to go with it. And then people started asking me, why do you do that? And I hadn't really thought about it, except I just love sounds and the sounds each different creature makes. And it makes, you know, I learned all the different frogs, so I could identify them by their sounds, and the birds, insects, and things like that. But really, this nature sounds give my music a place, like a setting for it to happen. I record my nature sounds in stereo. So I use either 2 microphones or a stereo microphone. So if a bird flies from left to right and you're listening to the music, you can hear that bird. If he's calling when he's flying, you can hear him go through the stereo field from left to right.
Got it.
And so it gives all this spatial dimension to my music.
Sammy has played in and with numerous bands. We spoke of a few, including one called The 8 of Us.
That was the band in the late 60s that I was in. We had a horn section. Most other bands were getting into acid rock and all of that, tie-dyed generation, but we were into soul music. And we were like a novelty because we traveled around and did fraternity parties. You know, Motown music was really popular, party music. It was good time music, and it's still one of my favorite. You know, just the energy and the rhythms and just what they're saying, you know, the way I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. The way they say these romantic things, I just love that, you know, the way those lyricists wrote those old songs like that. It's not like I'm really stuck in the old, and maybe I am stuck, but I don't even listen to much old music. I mostly compose my own music. And so that's really what I'm focused on now is composing, and I don't really listen to the radio for music. Once in a while I listen to the classical or opera, but not very often. I don't like to just listen to the oldies because there's this huge gap. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. She says, you know, I don't listen to any music. Nothing appeals to me. To me, there is this niche that if I could appeal to more people my age, you know, if they're tired of listening to the old music and they don't have anything they can relate to currently, there seems that there would be something in between. I know the older you get, it seems like louder music bothers you. I find that to be true with myself. Even though I still play in rock and roll bands, I still do it once in a while. I couldn't do it every night.
I hear you.
Well, the first band I was in when I was 15, we were called the Rogues, and I think we played 3 times. The next was the 8 of Us in the late 60s through the early 70s. I joined a band called the La Bamba Brothers, and we were doing original, fusion, and almost the forerunner of smooth jazz, except we were a little bit more progressive than how smooth jazz turned out to be. I had a band starting in the mid-'80s called River Breeze. We revived some of the soul music and the R&B, and plus we did some of our own music. And we kept up and tried to do a few contemporary things. Stevie Winwood, and if somebody came out with a song that fit our instrumentation, we would try to do that. Billy Joel, stuff like that. And of course we had Pam Laws singing with us once in a while when she was available. And then all throughout that time, late 70s, I was in the band here called Wakulla, and these guys live in Sopchoppy. When I wasn't playing with River Breeze or La Bamba, I was playing with Wakulla. Our biggest problem was always having a drummer, and they would come and go. Seemed like they seemed to drift in and out, have more character than a lot of the rest of us. Of course, the core was Susan Solberg and Snorri Solberg and William Solberg, who unfortunately passed away in 2005. He was the bassist. Dan Gramling and Tommy Owen, and I play saxophone with them.
In 1986, the Department of State, Division of Cultural Affairs, invited Sammy, pianist Lindsay Sargent, vocalist Pam Laws, and trumpeter Renee Arbogast to the Soviet Union to establish a sister city program through music. They would, in essence, become music ambassadors.
And it was still a communist country, but they had started to open up. Gorbachev had this term called perestroika, where they were trying to be more open and let people see what was going on in the rest of the world. And so we were the second group to go over there to a town called Krasnodar, and that was our sister city. We played concerts in Leningrad, Krasnodar, Kishinev, plus we had some jam sessions with the Soviet musicians.
But that was a difficult thing to do, was it not?
Well, it was. Our tour guide worked for the government, and she was also our translator. The musicians over there are very restricted on what they can play. Their set list has to be approved, no improvisation, very stilted and strict. And so one afternoon, we got word out to the musicians that we were going to get together, but we didn't tell our tour guide.
The double agent.
The double agent. We didn't tell her, but about 20 musicians came, and nobody knew any Russian and nobody knew any English. They didn't know any English and we didn't know any Russian, but all we would have to do was play a few bars, and they go, "Yes, Gershwin, Summertime." They knew all they loved American jazz. They were better than me, I felt like. They knew it better than I did. They had really studied it. And where I'd been studying pop and dance music, these guys had been really studying American jazz in a scholarly way. And they weren't allowed to improvise in public. They played in the restaurants were where the nightclubs were. People would go eat dinner, and then there would be music and dancing. And most of their music was American music. They didn't really do their cultural music. They did pop music. And if there was a saxophone solo, it sounded just like the record. But when we met that day for that jam session, we realized that all these players knew how to improvise. They were doing it secretly. And so this was like a big event for them to actually, I don't know what happened to them after we left. I hope they're okay, but I'm sure they are. It's hard to explain. It's just somebody wanting to play so bad and express themselves when you're not allowed to.
He told me of how his development of soundtracks for documentaries came about.
Our dear friend Natalie Provost, who passed away last year, she actually discovered Elam out at the beach. He was filming these turtle nests, and the guy was going to meet there and dig up the nest and see which eggs were viable and help them get to the water. So he was there to film that, and she found out that was going on. So she spent the night on the beach, wrapped up in a blanket, waiting for him to get there, and introduced herself to him after he got through filming. And she said, "Well, do you have music for your documentary?" And he said, "No, I don't." She says, "Well, if I send you some CDs of a friend of mine, will you listen to them?" He said, "Yes, I will."